Good evening, everybody. It is a great pleasure to welcome you here at the Natural History Museum in Berlin. And for those of you who are online, welcome. It is a wonderful place which you have to come to someday if you haven't been to. We're coming to you live from Berlin. Tonight's topic is rethinking cities. It's quite interesting to look at the history of the city and what a city means. What does an urban area mean? Where do we live? How do we live? Why do we live in cities? Is it a choice? Is it not a choice? And what does a city mean today? What will it mean into the future? It has been a place where one gathers to find opportunity, to find friends, to learn, to have opportunity. Will it stay that way over the next 50 years? We have a great program tonight for you, a dialogue between three amazing individuals, and this is part of the Berlin Science Week. This is providing a forum for scientists, science-driven organizations, and others to engage with the public, share insights into current topics, discuss grand challenges, and for us to envision the future together. I'm here hosting. My name is Chris LUEBKEMAN. I have the privilege of being the head of the strategic foresight team within the Office of the President of the ETH in Zurich. And we have been a proud partner with Berlin Science Week since 2017. Now, many of you will hopefully tweet. You will Instagram. We have our hashtags. We have our handles, or however you want to call them. Please feel free to do that during this next hour and a bit. Now, this event is part of ETH Zurich's Rethinking Living program. We have been trying to understand many aspects of life and living in all sorts of ways. We are all feeling massive changes across just about every aspect of our lives. Climate change, the destruction of biodiversity, the coronavirus pandemic, the technological disruptions present threats, but they're also opportunities. And they're an opportunity for us to look at these as challenges, not to think them away, but to look at them actually right in their faces. Rethinking Living convenes scientists, industry experts, and outstanding global thinkers at various events around the world. It's a program which we're continue to do now. Now, tonight is an event which is a co-sponsored event, if you will. It's presented by ETH Zurich in cooperation with Enhance, called the Enhance Collaboration. And Enhance represents a new alliance of research-intense universities. It drives responsible societal transformation. I have to read this one because I'm sure I get this one right. This is very... Drives responsible societal transformation, inspires and pushes for the development and utilization of science and technology for the benefit of society, turning global challenges into meaningful opportunities. This is something which we all take quite seriously. Now, this event is also part of Zurich Meets Berlin, and I encourage you to visit the Zurich exhibition downstairs in the Dinosaur Hall. How can you not? I mean, if you had to walk through it to get here, so stop and check it out. In particular, we would really like to invite you to stop at our exhibition from the ETH Zurich called Material Shapes the Ages. I never imagined that I would see steel that floats. And this is what you see right here is metal which floats. And that is pretty amazing, actually. And to think, why? And this is in the exhibition. Simone, who's our curator here in the front row, we're very glad to share with you more insights about the exhibition, or on your way out or downstairs, or even tomorrow to check it out. So with that, I want to thank you, Simone. Now, our time together will be 60 minutes, plus or minus, maybe a little bit longer, depending on how nervous you all get, and if you want to leave, we know we'll leave. But I'm going to ask our three speakers to come up, and we're going to have a bit of a dialogue, and then you will also have a chance to ask questions. Now, there are little cards that were on your seats. You might be sitting on them. I don't think every single seat had them. If you don't have a card, then maybe you can borrow one from your neighbor. But hold up the card at one point, and we have a microphone which will be running around, and I'll ask for different people to ask one question. I'll just repeat that tiny bit of instruction. I'll ask you to ask one question. And we've all been at things where the question turns into a half-hour commentary, and I'd rather it be one question. Now, after then, we will then have a continued dialogue between all four of us and you. So, are we ready? Oh, come on. Here we go. Are we ready for this? Just rethink cities. There you go. Excellent. Now, much, much better. So our first guest, I need a little bit of cue the music. Our first guest tonight is Jennifer GIROUX. Jennifer is a wonderful human, a Detroit-based strategy and research professional who works in the social impact field at the intersection of social resilience, stakeholder engagement, and organizational integrity, responsibility, and risk. And Jennifer is also an ETH alumni and a founding member of the ETH Circle. So welcome, Jennifer. Come on up. Woo-hoo. Next, thank you. Next, we have Catherine de Wolf. Catherine is a professor of circular engineering for architecture at the ETH Zurich, and she conducts research on the digital innovation towards a circular built environment. And she likes to travel through time when it comes to building materials. We're going to hear a little bit more about that. I found it quite intriguing when she gave us that. So, Catherine, welcome. Let's go for a welcome. Come on up. And finally, we have ANNEMIE WYCKMANS. She is also, and I say also, come back to that in just a minute, a civil engineer in architecture and professor at the Department of Architecture and Planning at the NTNU in Trondheim, Norway. She develops and leads European innovation projects that guide cooperation between public and private sectors and other societal stakeholders to make cities' transitions to climate neutrality more inclusive, beautiful, and sustainable. Now, how can that be anything but a wonderful thing, right? So, ANNEMIE, welcome. Come on. So, I'm going to start with Jennifer. Now, Jennifer, Detroit, the place of your birth, a city which has gone through many changes. And we're talking about rethinking cities. It's had to rethink itself more than once.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that and how you got to doing what you're doing now.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's a big question, but I know we have a few minutes. So I've always been interested in the relationship between people and space, people and their environment. And a lot of the work that I did as an academic, I now consider myself as a pracademic. I work more in the applied sector. But, my work as an anthropologist, that's my background, and really being also very interdisciplinary, was always looking at how do we create meaning in the spaces that we live? How do we shape and influence behavior? How is our behavior shaped by our environment? And a lot of my work in the early days of my studies and my practice was around looking at infrastructure and looking at the relationship between people and their built environment. And so I did a lot of work looking at the targeting behaviors of violent groups and looking at and that relationship, particularly in oil and gas or resource-rich areas. And it was through that work, some of my work in Nigeria was looking at the production of peaceful spaces within conflict areas. So I was really fascinated about how people in areas where they're maybe under-resourced or highly resourced, but how do we create the spaces within that, and particularly within civic society? And what's the role of corporations? What's the role of organizations? Different parts of non-state actors, really. And it was through that work I just started really getting involved in working with organizations to help them engineer and develop a deep understanding of the human beings behind the spaces that they work, and really bring that into strategy and into engagement and into shaping and building more meaningfully and engaging more meaningfully in a way that benefits us as a collective. And so when I talk about social impact, I talk about that aspect of how are we going to address these social challenges with really solutions across different stakeholders. And I feel like, Chris, so much of that work on critical infrastructure and the relationship between human beings and their environment has all led me to this point of where do I want to be in a city where I can bring all that to
All that understanding
together.
yeah.
Exactly. And for me, it was all about Detroit. Because for me, it's...
But was Detroit where you were born?
Yeah, it was
Okay.
the area, but I never thought, I actually never thought I would be able to move back. My work was very much international, largely across the global south. And I just thought most of my work would be out in the global community. And then, I don't know, I think everybody knows what I'm about to refer to, but you get that little voice in your stomach or in your head, and it's kind of whispering to you, you should go off and do this. And there's a little Detroit whisper that started emerging in 2018. I looked at my husband and our 2 cats, and I said, "Should you guys be up for this?" And the idea was...
What did the cats say?
My cats are Swiss, so they were really skeptical. We picked them up while we lived in Switzerland. So they're still skeptical. But the idea was, how can we go in a time of talking about the sustainable transition, right? Where can we go and be in a city? We lived in cities all around the world, and we were just consuming. And then I had this experience across the global south of seeing how people, against incredible forces and challenges, were able to leapfrog over that and build really productive communities. And so for me, it was Detroit felt like the best fit, because what an amazing opportunity, city that came out of bankruptcy in 2013, where 20% of the built environment has been demolished. It's vacant, right? It's an enormous scale. It's a scale, the city is very spread out, so it feels at times it's this intermittent development, and you're ebbing and flowing. I thought, what an amazing time to go to a place that could teach me how to citizen in a moment of this transition that we're making collectively, globally. And I thought, let me go to the most challenging city in the world to do that.
That's
the
a
most
great,
awesome opportunity.
I really like that you said, to teach me how to citizen.
Yes.
I think that's a really wonderful, that's a really wonderful phrase to pause right on that one and to move, because I think that's really fantastic. We'll come back to that.
Circle back.
Okay. Catherine, you studied civil engineering in Belgium, and now you're talking about circular materials for architects. Connect those dots for me.
Well, I studied civil engineering and architecture already in Belgium.
Okay.
So it's one of the few countries where you can really combine the 2 degrees.
Yep.
And for me, that was always natural, right, to combine civil engineering and architecture. I don't see the one without the other. And sometimes I cannot really tell which one is civil engineering and which one is architecture. And in a lot of practices and universities, it's very separate. And so when I had to define a name for my chair at ETH Zurich, it was clear that it was going to be about circular construction. And that would have been simple to call it like this. But circular engineering for architecture was really what I wanted to do, because I'm in the Department of Civil, Environmental and Geomatic Engineering. And I think it's really, as engineers, we are trying to solve problems for a purpose, right? And so it's towards an architecture that makes the world more circular, that makes us use our resources in a smarter way, is really what I wanted to work towards. So our buildings are really built in a very linear way today. We extract resources, we produce our building materials, we use our buildings, and then at the end of life, we throw it away.
Chuck it away, yeah.
So how can we make this more circular in the sense that we use our buildings as long as possible? The building we're in is a beautiful example of this. You can feel also the history, and you can admire also the construction techniques from another time. You can see the history. We're looking also at the bullets holes that were filled in. So there is this time component of buildings that we have forgotten today, and today it's very easy to say, let's just demolish and build something new, something bigger, without thinking about the impact that this has on the environment, right? And so this circular thinking, I wanted to bring this back into both engineering and architecture and bring these disciplines together. And Jennifer was also mentioning about the social impact and behavioral studies. And we were just chatting about her background as an anthropologist. And I mentioned to her that one of my first hires in my lab was an anthropologist. So in my lab, I have architects and civil engineers, of course, but I also have computer scientists, I have anthropologists. I think it's really important to connect different disciplines because we have very complex issues to solve today.
So in a way, you're sort of rethinking cities by rethinking a mindset of segregation to a mindset of collaboration.
Exactly. I think it's very important to connect people with each other and connect disciplines with each other to solve the most pressing issues of our time.
So we're going to come back to some of your research, what you're working on. I'd like to hear more about that. But before we do that, I want to go right next to you because it happens that we have two Belgian civil engineers here tonight. But Anne-Marie, you have taken it a very different path to land at what you're doing. So tell us a little bit more about what you're doing and how you got there.
Sure. Well, we started in the same place, similar education, maybe like 30 kilometers from each other, more or less. But I very quickly figured out that I studied architecture and engineering, but I didn't really want to become an architect. I did 1 year of political science. I thought it was a bit abstract. And I did something in building technology. I liked working with people better. And then I guess I started, okay, I thought I could teach a bit, I could work with students, etc. And the first workshop I had to do was, I was terrified. What am I going to do with all these people? Are they going to listen to me? So not just presenting, but working together. And then I figured out that I loved doing that. I loved bringing people together, and the more different disciplines, the better. We started out with architects and engineers, and then we started adding economists and sociology and filmmakers and everything else. And I thought, well, we do that with students. We have these experts in teamwork courses. But we could also do that in innovation projects, right? So we started to create projects where we put professionals, practitioners, policymakers together, and societal stakeholders, so citizens, communities, and choosing an area in the city and just do experiments locally and figuring out what people want and need. And then we started to take that and inform policy and politics based on it. So kind of the circle is complete. I do some of the political science and some of the architecture, some of bringing people together. So now we have this big craft, creating actionable futures urban movement, where we bring cities together that, yes, they want to become climate neutral, but they want to do this in a way that makes them also more beautiful and inclusive and resilient and robust, and that is based on local communities and what's already happening there. So yes, you need to do the big infrastructure investments and the big political decisions, and you need to reduce and remove, etc. But what if you turn that around and use the opportunity to find a more positive future? So that's what we're working with cities on, to learn from each other. Because if you say, oh, you need to become climate neutral, a lot of cities think, well, we're not ready for that. Yeah. We try, but we can't get there fast enough. But if you start to talk about working with local communities, maybe some urban gardening, looking at better mobility, how can you walk and bike within your neighborhood? How is it easier to... I'm sorry to say, I tried the Deutsche Bahn.
Moving on. Okay, moving on. Yes, we're all aware of this pain. Yes, all of us.
It is just, I'm sorry, but I couldn't manage. And, I'm used to working with apps, etc., etc. And it was so difficult. It was even not available in English, etc. And then so... How can you just make it easier and more attractive for people, and just like, yes, we want to do this. This is part of our identity and culture. And so that's what we want to do. And actually after this, I'm going to Prague, and there we are bringing all of these cities together for the first time. Some, in the vicinity that are there, some online, and we're going to discuss how can we learn from each other. What's everyone already doing? We have cities from Bulgaria and Romania and Scandinavia and Turkey and, all across Europe. Small ones, like a few tens of thousands, and then cities with several million people. And they're all going to discuss and check what is everyone doing and how can we test something that worked somewhere else. Would that also work with us? And then where do we go from there?
I think that's really fantastic, as you're saying. You just have to almost make it easy to do the right thing. And I think this is something, I think, Catherine, with your work, I'm going to come back this way for a second, with your work is with looking at digital tagging, or tell us a little bit about your work and how you trying to make it easy to do the right thing.
Yeah, I mean, what you just said about making things easier really resonates, like you said, with my work, because we explore digital technologies that are used a lot in other sectors, and we bring them to the construction sector to make circular construction easier, because I believe that when you want to make an old model obsolete, like I want to do with the linear construction model, you need to make the new model more attractive, right? Easier, cheaper, faster, more common sense to do, right? And so what we do is we look at all steps of construction and buildings and see where we can use technologies like, for example, machine learning. How can we use computer vision to recognize, based on Google Street View images, which materials are in buildings, in what state they are, what condition they are, and then have a better view on which building materials we could reuse in the future when a building gets demolished. We can also use that to predict demolition. We also, when we are demolishing a building, we tag our materials so that we can track and trace them throughout their future life cycles, right? So we did that, I think, in the beginning you showed a slide with a dome on it. That's a dome that we built on the campus with a building that my students disassembled entirely. So this was a 2-floor timber building that's in 2 days my students disassembled. So that was quite impressive to see actually how easy it was to disassemble this building. But then the tricky part is giving an identity to the materials, right? And so we engraved QR codes on the timber beams. And so now when you go to this dome, you can scan the QR codes of all of the elements, and it gives you a bit of information in a database that says this beam was previously in this building and is now in this building. It has these dimensions, it has these properties. This is what the material went through. And it really gives an identity to the material so that you can track and trace it and reuse it more easily in the future. And it's really about using technologies that we have today to make it easier to reuse building materials.
I think I'm going to add a couple things. You said easier, cheaper, faster, more. I'm going to add more beautiful, healthier. You know, I'm sure.
More value.
Oh no! Someone's balloon box. Bummer. And scared us all. But that's okay. There we go.
Fine, we adapt.
Okay, we're okay now. Well, we didn't all duck. That's
No, we all like.
I'm surprised you didn't duck.
No,
you know?
man, I worked in conflict zones. I'm good with Big Bang. Yeah.
Right. Anyway,
more beautiful is also a really big important factor for us as well. And we see that when you make more beautiful structures, more beautiful buildings, more beautiful cities, it also creates an incentive to keep the building, right? So I was talking earlier about wanting to avoid demolition. I mean, this building is probably here because it's beautiful, right? And people kind of like this. I mean, there are many examples of beautiful structures where a lot of labor and craftsmanship went in there. And we recognize the value also of beauty as something that fosters circular construction, right?
And it's part of a mindset shift when we're thinking about rethinking cities, how we think about those spaces, but what does beauty mean in the different typologies of spaces and places. Now, Jennifer, so making things easier, how does that resonate for you with what you've been doing in Detroit?
Yeah, so for me, what popped up as you were talking about that, and you were talking about an app, so businesses, right, or even governments, right, they have this tendency, especially when you talk about businesses, and they're working in the tech space, and they want to work in the space of city healing or city transition or city solutions. You know, businesses have a tendency to make a product. They call it a product. They have users and they have experience and they just throw it out. We see this with like the electric scooters, right? Electric scooters, all of a sudden one day, there was electric scooters all over our cities. And it was like, what is going on, right? And before, not too long after, they were very easy to use, but they became electric trash in a way, right? Just cluttering up. And I think when I think about making it easy, it's thinking about, thinking about the whole system. So getting businesses or those that are in the space of making solutions for the city and using technology to interface with our physical environment, thinking about going to those different stakeholders, understanding, what are the ways that they move? How do they understand? How do we make something, I love your term, beautiful, easy and beautiful, but also understanding yourself within a larger system, right? Because when the electric scooters entered into our environment, yeah, you could jump on and it's zippy and it's fun, but then suddenly it's conflicting with other mobility in our cities and our pathways on sidewalks and how we move on bikes, and it suddenly became a nuisance, right? And that is the product of businesses doing city solutions, but not working within the larger city construct, not looking at things systemically. And so for me, when you say easy, make it easy and beautiful, but particularly on easy, it's like thinking about your different stakeholders, thinking about how am I going to make this easy for the city and the governance of the city? How am I going to make this easy for, I don't want to call them users, I want to call us residents, I want to call us citizens, because it's a different mindset. And when you think about it from that aspect of citizenship. And so when universities and businesses are working in the space of cities, how do we all start to reframe our citizenship in that space and how that influences the sort of solutions that we make to make that easy and to fit within our environment smoothly and beautifully.
That's really great. So Anne-Marie, when some of the projects you've been working on across Europe, how does that resonate with you, this product citizenship?
Yes, I was writing it down because basically it's some of the same thing.
Yeah.
We work with a lot of cities that need to reinvent themselves somehow. They might have started out in fishing, let's say, and then became oil and gas, and then a lot of waterfront cities have this. We like the water; it's part of our identity, but it might also flood us soon, and so a lot of cities need to rethink themselves. And this thing about it should be easy to do the right thing, but what is the right thing? That's one of the challenges. So it's not engineering where you make a calculation and you have one right answer. There's a lot of different pathways towards that goal. And the whole point is that we need everyone to be part of thinking and testing what would be the right thing here for our community, in our context, with our history, with our local resources. And that is something that professionals alone can't do. So we need citizens reframing citizenship not as customers, not as citizens as they've always been, but as co-creators of that future.
Agreed.
And so how do we do that, or how do we?
Can you give us an example of how to do that when you're rethinking a city?
Well. One of the examples is that there's a lot of municipalities that, by law or because they want to, invite citizens to give feedback on, let's say, a planning strategy, or if they're going to redevelop an area, you have an opportunity to give feedback, input. Now, very often, when there is this invitation, there's very few answers in the beginning. And then the more time goes by, the more answers you get and the more negative they become, but by then it's too late, right? So the more concrete and visual it becomes, the more negative answers you get, but then you can't really change anything anymore. And we worked a lot with the municipalities. We organize workshops and citizen hearings, etc. And it's so difficult to get people in, or you always get the same people in. But then we started to ask people, okay, so what would it take for you to get engaged? Because obviously it's in your interest. And they say, yeah, but I'm not an expert. Maybe I don't know best, or I don't want to go there because what if I say something wrong, or I don't understand, then I can't ask. So we need to create confidence and trust and openness, and making sure that people feel that yes, I'm welcome there and I can contribute and I can ask as many questions as I want, and it doesn't matter if someone already asked the question, or so it's everything is legitimate. So, and how do you build that confidence? And that's where we work a lot with arts and culture, maybe to ask different questions, challenge people in a different way, and not just citizens. So the most fun thing is to get, for example, a group of engineers, technology experts in a room and get artists to challenge them by reframing what they do. So that's like getting people to think about not just asking the same question over and over again and doing the same calculation and the same argument, but reframing it, looking at it from a different perspective together, and see if we then can find different answers or different processes towards an answer.
Can I reflect on that really quickly? Just from, or no, I'll let you. I'm
Okay, sure.
chomping at the bit.
Absolutely.
You know, in Detroit, we're building a 30-acre mobility innovation district, which is, you know, aiming to chart out the future of mobility. So in a way, in Detroit, we're going back to our roots, which is fun. But going to this aspect of how do you co-create. So what we've been doing is, and this is really fantastic because it's this public-private partnership, so leveraging the collective. There's an aspect of Detroit, because of the road it's been on, there was an aspect for those that were living in the city during its ups and downs, and largely during its downs, that as a community, you had to really bond together if you were going to survive and thrive, right? So there is this indigenous knowledge. So I love that you pointed out this, like, confidence, right? You need to know how to citizen. And so in a way, we're a bit practiced in Detroit, but here's what we've been doing, because we've had a lot of new residents who've come in who are in the space of just being in a city and consuming. We have multiple different ways in which we are organizing, hosting online, in-person groups. We have QR codes that we're putting around our neighborhood. So if you can't, or if you don't feel confident to participate in a feedback session or a user experience, whatever you want to call it, session on the design of the park or where the structures are going to be in this mobility district, or what's going to be offered in the buildings that are going to be there, how do you want to interact with the space? We're finding multiple different channels and utilizing those to reach the citizen, right? And start to bring them, knowing that there are people that have been in Detroit for a while who are used to doing this and active. And so you get a lot of those same people in the meetings. But then how do you bring that new and create that new sense of belonging and ownership and activation? So we're using multiple channels, so not just the face-to-face, QR codes and other sort of different formats, creating more casual settings in businesses, you know, coffee shops and whatnot, to meet people where they're at and start to create that foundation of what does it mean to citizen? How can I connect with my fellow neighbors, you know, residents? How can
members,
how can I participate? And the thing about behaviorally is we work as a social group. So when you put people together socially, it creates pressure to behave socially. So when you start to create meaning on, we are going to come together. Did you attend that meeting? Are you participating? Did you take that survey? So we're using a lot of feedback mechanisms in our community to create that social pressure to drive people to participate in these key decisions.
Interesting. You know, when you made me think of like the different learning styles.
Yeah.
Because different generations need to be engaged in different ways from media and different learning styles.
Yeah.
And so you're really trying to as broad as possible.
Yeah.
Catherine.
I would also like to
Yeah.
add something to that.
I knew you were coming.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to talk a lot about, a bit about the participatory building of a city, right? And this goes a lot along the ways of circular construction. Often a circular construction project is also a participatory construction project, where we really ask the people that we build for what they need and to even help sometimes. So to give you an example, I worked a bit for an NGO called Trazando Espacios Públicos in Venezuela, where this is a friend of mine from my studies who created this NGO. She's from Venezuela, and she's working on creating public spaces with the children. Usually it's for schools, around schools. So she does this with the children and the teachers and the parents of the schools. And the children really are making drawings of what they would like to see in the public spaces. And then the architects are designing something according to those drawings. And then we really take the children with us and build something so I was there for a little time. So we worked a lot with reuse materials more out of necessity. But the children were really helping designing and constructing the public spaces. And it gave them a sense of belonging, but also a sense of responsibility, right? So if you have built a space or designed a space yourself, you also know how to maintain it, you know how to repair it, and you also want to respect it. So you will tell your peers not to break anything or have respect for the public spaces, right? And that was also part of the model of it. And we've done this recently on another project with my partner in Switzerland, where they asked also the children of a school to design the cabins in which they would, it's a school that teaches in the forest, so they need some cabins in the forest. And they design with the children also the drawings, and the children also helped building the cabins and so on. So it's also about even one step further, making them help design and build our cities, so that they really understand the value of it.
It comes back to ownership.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's
Starting it at a
really
very
feeling
young
of
age.
ownership, and whether it's getting a community, getting a city part again. So I'm going to pause just 2 seconds here. That's really great to let you all know, both online, you can put questions into the chat, and then they'll let me know if there's some questions there. And here in the room, if you have some questions. Does anybody have a question already? If not, I can talk to them all night. Yeah, this is easy for me. Anyone have a question? All right. So I'm going to ask like 2 more times. This is going once, going twice. Okay. So, all right. So rethinking cities. When you think, say, 5, 10, 20 years into the future, with all of your work, how have we rethought? What has happened in retrospect, if you look back, so that the mindset has changed? What has changed? What process has changed that we're looking back as we're rethinking? And just describe that a little bit if you can, because I think I love what all of you are aiming at. I'm just trying to, but who wants to go first?
I can go first.
Yeah,
Sure.
I mean,
2 things. One is we started to work more with societal readiness. You mentioned, getting a product or a service ready for the market, but what if you don't just think about technology readiness, but societal readiness? So how do you do that learning and that creative confidence and all of these things? That's one. And that actually, that was taken seriously, not as a byproduct of or getting people to accept something, but as an actual way forward. The second is that we always talk about, you need integrated solutions, you need to take nature-based and circular and culture and identity and everything together, and then you find that nice physical solution and process that's going to make it work. Well, we don't have any way to assess the feasibility or the financial viability of those solutions as to now. Every unit, even within a municipality, every unit has its own procedures, its own indicators, and it just doesn't match. So what we are doing now is to make a kind of impact model. So something that helps cities, stakeholders to look across all of these fields and see where do we see the benefits? What do you get if you put the nature-based and the identity and the language and the economy together, and you try to make a solution that is good for all of them? Wouldn't that be better than looking at a compromise that's the least possible thing that you could make it work to avoid conflicts, etc. So thinking positively, like if we put these together, we could do so much more, rather than just finding the least possible potential compromise. And finding that model or those models, finding a way to work across the units and the sectors, and to look at the benefits of doing that. It's not something costly and, we don't do that here and it's time consuming, but no, this is actually what's going to work. This is what's going to make it possible to invest in it, because it will be cheaper down the line. It will be better for more people. It will create value. It will make it more affordable. It will make it more profitable.
Yep.
But then we need to start to work like that and don't say, oh no, that's not how we do things here, or we can't do that because we have these and these regulations. So we need to stop thinking that, oh, this is blocking us, and just do it and then find a way to convince the investors and the politicians to, this is actually better for us.
Great. So 2040, you're looking back, Catherine?
Well, when you asked a bit, what does it mean rethinking cities? And I reflected a bit on what we just said before, and I was thinking, what about reconnecting cities, right? We talked a lot about different people, different disciplines, and participatory architecture. And I was thinking, we talked about things being easy. For example, we talked about apps making things easier. And when I think about apps that really were successful on a business side, I would say, it was about connecting people, right? Like, let's say Airbnb, for example, was connecting people that had an apartment with people who were looking for one. Uber is also kind of matching people who have a car with someone who needs a ride. So when we rethink our cities, we should rethink the connections between the people, right? How do we connect with each other? How do we connect across different disciplines, across different stakeholders? And this is when we talked about citizenship, for example, and about bringing the users also back into the design and construction process. It's also about connecting people in the end.
That's cool. I like the rethinking connectivity.
Exactly.
Because at the end of the day, this is the glue in the neighborhoods that you were talking about. That social pressure. It's like connected. There's a connection, a feeling of obligation, or within your cities that you're working with innovation, trying to get folks to connect again. That's a really great point. 2040, looking back.
Well, I mean, I think we have a real challenge in the cities, and I've thought a lot about, how does Detroit, it's so unique, how does it relate to the rest of the world in the city landscape, right? And I think across cities, and it goes back, and I know this is going to be my drumbeat, but I want everyone to walk out of this room knowing this, is this aspect of how do you participate, right? And so when I think about 20 years down the road, we are so conditioned to just consume in our cities, right? It took me to get to my 40s until I participated in a city council meeting. And I'm shocked. I'm a highly educated person who's worked on societal resilience, who's worked in the built environment, and yet it took me a while before I actually started participating in a city.
Interesting.
And so, when I've been participating, those are really tough spaces to participate in. They're not designed for us. They're not designed for the citizen. They speak encoded language. Their meetings are at times where everyone's working. So for me, I want to rethink like even city governance, right? So in 25 years, 30 years, how have we not only created a more participatory culture where you take it as a responsibility to be informed, to participate, to connect, but also we've made it easier within government to meet people where they're at. So what is the redesign of how we organize in government and governance that needs to take place? That's my hope, and that's my pursuit.
That's really great. I'm going to ask with a show of hands, how many of you have attended a local Gemeinde or a local city government meeting? Just put your hands up really high.
Yeah, let's see it.
Right, so it's about 10%.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. I mean,
that's your call to action after this meeting. Go to your city council meeting. Go to one of them.
Oh,
yes.
man. Piece of homework, right? You had to take a piece of homework away, an action homework. That's really good. So societal readiness, building confidence, rethinking, great themes for us. And I'm going to come back to you. Who has a question? I know there's a whole class in here. There's a whole class of students. I'm expecting at least 3 or 4 questions from you. Otherwise, I'm going to be really disappointed. So we have 1, 2, 3 right here. So Nina's going to give you, okay? It should.
Is it on?
Yeah.
Thank you. Great panel. Thank you so much. I have one question about, you were talking about connecting people, and I was wondering, in cities you very often also experience people that are disconnected. And you were talking about the design of fostering active participation of citizens. How does that keep in mind the people that are disconnected, and thinking about minorities here specifically? I live in Neukölln, so I know that people there are it's a very thriving neighborhood, but people are very much disconnected when it comes to decision-making of what their city should look like in the future. And are there any ways of trying to embrace them in a better way?
Yeah. So I have a few thoughts on this. I think if we think about the city as a network, right, and we think about it as a network of also associations. So I'm a leader in my community. I'm on the board of my neighborhood association. And one of the mandates that I take on my neighborhood association level, because we actually, Detroit is 80% Black, and then the rest of the 20% of the citizens are a mixture of, it's actually quite diverse. So we have the largest Arab American community in the United States. We have, just very diverse groups. And in my community, we have a very strong Latin American community, so people with origins from Mexico. And they've expressed the same thing. So what we've done, what I think in terms of our approach for that, and I'd love to hear if other of my panelists have thoughts on this, is we've taken as a mandate, so created hyper-local leadership and started to educate and started to create a safe space. What does it mean? What's happening in the city? So a lot of people, the reason why they don't get engaged, they don't know or they don't feel like their voice or their things matter. We talk about, one of the things, I actually have it on my phone, there's this app that we use in Detroit called Improve Detroit. And I've gone out and used this within my community to educate. It's an app where you can report if you see a pothole or any sort of issue that is. I'm an anthropologist, so I'm always bringing an artifact. Yeah, so helping bridge the gap between citizens to give them tools where they can start to see. And they can start to be engaged and see that their voice does matter. So what are entry points that you have in your community? Is there a certain app or some sort of service that you can bring to your community, start to host community meetings, show them that this is a way that they can be engaged, and actually the way that they can have ownership. They can have a sense of agency, because when you talk about communities that are maybe disengaged, they lack the confidence, there's usually something around self-efficacy. I don't know how to do it, sense of agency, I don't have the power to do it. And bridging the gap and showing, I got other artifacts, showing that the survey that they took on the design of the local park, their feedback actually mattered, and that feedback led to, a different design decision. So we take, as a community association, with working in a community with historically underrepresented or marginalized groups, we try to not only expose them to these tools and resources, but also show them when their participation makes a difference. And that is such an important aspect of closing that loop.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
That's a great response. Anne-Marie, I saw you were writing a bunch of comments. Sorry, it's just a teacher in me. I can't.
Yes.
Let's say the short answer would be what she said.
Okay, good. All right. Next.
In Norway, we have a program called, I was thinking about how to translate it. You could call it neighborhood boost, but it means boost, but also promise.
Oh,
and
I love that.
It's really like a local community, and then going in and working with the local resources, people. And that could also be, because a lot of people don't have an app or even a cell phone, so it could be a local library or a community center or a cafe. So where do people meet?
Yeah.
And if there's no meeting space, how do you create one where you see that people would be, it would be easy for people to go in and have a little talk, have a coffee, have a waffle, something, and talk, and build around that. And by being present, the proximity locally, you maybe not immediately, but people will be curious. They will start to come by. They will talk over a cup of coffee, and you'll find all of those like hidden treasures. A lot of local resources and knowledge. Being expert at your local community that you didn't know. And so we have these programs, and then we have the climate programs. And until recently, they haven't interacted with each other. So in some neighborhoods, you have the climate programs with the energy efficient buildings and networks, etc. And then you have these neighborhood boost programs. And what we started to do now is, how would you combine them? Between municipal units in one area with vulnerable communities. So how would you, and then it's not about the big energy infrastructures, but it could be about sharing solutions, sharing in time or sharing a space, using something in a new way, circularity, reusing something, or just finding a new function for something that is no longer in use. So those kinds of things, doing small local urban gardens where people can meet, and in that way contribute to climate neutrality. And then people think, yes, okay, so what we do matters.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's a big point.
Basically, that's the feedback. Go ahead, Catherine, sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to add also one element that I consider something to reach out to as much people as possible is also education, and not just in the sense of what we're doing at university, but also from the very early ages at school, to give the children a sense of agency, right? And so I'm thinking of school education, but also you mentioned filmmakers in the beginning. Through films and through images, we consume a lot of images these days, and this is how we communicate. So I think it's also important to bring the message across about where to find these actors of, in my case, reuse. Where can I find reuse materials to build something with that would be cheaper than buying something new? And I strongly believe that images is also a way to communicate with a lot of people at the same time. So education and films have also a role to play.
I totally hear that. I think all of you are talking about somehow building vocabulary that a community also feels that they can use, becoming familiar with that. The other thing made me thinking about is listening not just to voices, but to whispers. How can you hear the whispers that are in the room? And
the whispers may just be an expression, like the look on someone's face, right? So
but you have to be present.
You have to be present
in order for that to happen, and this is, I think, what you're saying there. So there's another question here, I believe, one here, and then we'll go up front, and then there's one in the back row. So we got 3, 4. All right, yes, ma'am.
Hello, thank you. A nice discussion. Thank you very much. My question is about the feedback people give, and so about change. When there's a new implementation and it affects people's day-to-day lives, most people are against change and they give bad feedback. And even though it's good for the future, they might care about their daily lives and find it as a negative effect on their lives. An example I have, in the junction, our building, there was a new bike lane that was painted a couple of weeks ago, and we just realized they painted it back to the car road again, like the bike road was gone.
Eliminated. The bicycles were now no longer welcome. Yeah.
And I imagine people were complaining, and maybe they decided back to change it back. So I was thinking what to do about complaints or people. How can we give this vision of
this discomfort with change, and how to get ready for the change, which is either bringing or inevitable.
Yes.
Okay, great.
It brings us back to your term of societal readiness, right? I think it's, in your example, did people from the neighborhood paint back the thing, or
no, the city?
The city. Okay.
City did.
So that also happens.
That also could happen. Yeah. I mean, there is I'm from Brussels, and there they try to make the city center pedestrian again. And in the beginning, there was a lot of complaints about it as well. The shops were like, "Oh, if we cannot come to my shop with the car anymore, I will lose customers," and so on. This like resistance to change. But then, of course, what happens is that when you make the area pedestrian, it makes it more nicer to walk around, and of course, you have more people coming to your shops, and it kind of changes a bit the dynamics. In my opinion, for the better, having a bit less cars in cities is and a bit more soft mobility is always a plus, in my opinion. But I think it comes back to what I just said before the question. Education and films is something that really can help people understand why the change is positive for them, and also kind of communicating the benefits for people as well of the changes that we want to bring. And I think communication is really important in that sense.
I totally hear that. And what's interesting with this, I don't know this exact example, but in cities, there are layers of voices.
Yes.
And I think this came to your question before as well, a little bit about those who have no voice, but those who have a bit of a voice, and those are extremely loud. And sometimes the loudest voice is not always their most rational.
Yeah.
Right? And how do we mediate between what's good for short-term, medium-term, and long-term?
Yeah.
Because sometimes there's short-term needs. I'm going to interpret your question a little bit here. Short-term needs versus long-term benefit. This is a very human challenge to begin with. Any thoughts on that one? Short-term, long-term?
Well,
We're rethinking cities.
Well, just really quickly, so the way we move, the way we build, the way we power, the way we eat, the way we live life is anchored in highly deep habits and deep mindsets, beliefs. And so I always see this with governments, but especially companies. They underestimate how much work you need to do to really shape understanding and help people come along. And also, let me just remind us, government is what we do together. So it's always difficult and choppy, and sometimes you make an intervention and you've done all the groundwork, and then, you know, we have to roll it back for a little bit. So we have to also have a little bit of resilience that, you know, just because something maybe fails or doesn't get the buy-in that you hoped, that maybe that's a part of the process. So going to this aspect of short, medium, long. So maybe sometimes the stumbling that we experience in the initial, even if we've done everything right, it's just a part of the journey for us to start to become familiar. So even if we have to walk it back, doesn't mean we can't go back to the drawing board and go forward. So taking a longer perspective, you know, businesses work so often, and especially startups, fast, fast, fast. I'm encouraging a lot of us to like slow down, right? Slow it down, slow down your expectations, slow down, you know, I know we have to quickly make the transition to a more sustainable city and living, but we do need to slow down a little bit and invest a lot more on the front end around understanding, storytelling, bringing people around so that we don't hit as many roadblocks.
Yeah.
Okay.
And maybe to say something about the short term, long term as well. The way decision makers are usually politicians, and they have their mandate, right?
Yeah.
And it's very popular to build a new bridge, but less popular to maintain an existing bridge already. And this kind of brings us to the problems with infrastructure that we know today. And that's kind of a big challenge for infrastructure in the built environment.
They love to be there with the circular for the cutting the ribbon.
Exactly.
Not for using the broom.
Right.
This is all over. Yes. Did you want to add something or should I keep
Yes.
going? Okay.
We often talk about bananas. So build absolutely nothing anywhere near anyone. But the problem is
wait, we got to say that one again.
Yeah.
The banana.
Yeah,
build
banana.
absolutely
Build
nothing.
absolutely nothing anywhere near anyone.
Yeah.
Because it's
Okay.
so, as you said, regardless of what the change is, people will be against it because it's change.
Yeah.
But that's exactly where the societal readiness comes in. So if you've talked to people, worked with them so they know it's coming, or that they've been part of shaping what it's going to look like, what it's going to do. And one concrete example that I also think answers one of those questions is one of the cities we work with, they have a river. So they want to create this district neighborhood that generates energy. So not by solar cells or so, but they have the river. So they want to put a turbine in the river. So that's going to, you know, rotate and create energy for the neighborhood, because it's a nice heritage neighborhood. So they don't want to add solar cells and start to renovate. You know, they want to do something else. So it would be positive for culture and identity. But then the river is also being used by rowers, sports groups. There's fishing going on.
Swimming.
So those people, of course, they're against it. And you know, what is it going to look like? Is it going to be noisy? Is it going to be polluting, etc.? And it took 4 years of talking, negotiating, dialogue on, could we find a solution that is actually good for everyone, that is beneficial? And it took 4 years, but we found a solution. And yes, so the energy experts and the economists and the local communities, the different sports groups and culture groups, and everyone was involved in finding this solution, but we did find one. And hopefully the next city that has a similar challenge will be able to use this, so they don't have to start from zero. So, but you have to want to, or someone needs to come in and create that space, an open space where these different interests can meet without making it a conflict, without raising it to, you know, some shouting match or so. So making a neutral ground where we can meet, where we can have this dialogue, where we can negotiate and find solutions together.
That's great. Okay, thank you. I'm going to take this next question up in front. No, you don't want to take it? There's one on the way back. There, Nina, with woman with the mask. And then we have a few questions that here have come in online, and we're probably going to take one of those. But we're going to have your question first. We're going to do this question. There's one over here, and then we're going to probably have to wrap up because we're cutting close to...
The room is warm now. Everyone's popping up.
Yeah, that's right. You know.
Everyone's all right.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, hello. As we talked about the mask, it's interesting because, like, we've been through this COVID stuff that puts the Earth as a city. And how are you thinking about it as we have this great abyss? in between our cities in Europe, United States, and the rest of the world. And we had these problems with vaccines and all of this stuff. And as a whole, thinking the Earth as a city, we can't just think about our own micro cities, our own micro problems, without thinking it as a whole, because it's a whole system and it wouldn't work properly if we are not thinking about. And now the immigration, we are having this great problem because of wars and this huge abysses we have in between our world. So what are you thinking about it? How are you seeing this? Thank you very much.
So the world as a city. I'm going to interpret that in saying we have the world, only have one planet. It is a massive system. We're disturbing it. And this is one of the needs with the translation or the transferal of knowledge to become a better planetary citizen, I guess. So what about being a better planetary citizens? How do we see that? Any of you want to comment to the question? No?
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, it's a very complex world that we're living in, right? And everything is very connected. And I think what we've talked about, and this is about rethinking cities, and we talked about on a city scale, on a community scale, and so on. And I think this is where changes are easier to kind of make. I mean, I talked about this example of changing public spaces with school children. This is a very small community. It's easier to go from a small community and make a change there, and then kind of try things out, and then see where we can upscale it, right? I think what we do need to do is understand where we can innovate and where we can go towards something that makes this world a better place, right? And and maybe I connect to one of the questions was about these interdisciplinary teams, and we talked a lot about connecting people, about connecting disciplines, and so on. So I think it's also about communicating and having exchanges and having a lot of diversity in the ideas that we exchange about making this a better place.
And be willing to do it. I mean, this is a key thing, is a mindset to open and to exchange. Yeah. So my response to yours is focusing on regeneration. If you take a look at the work from Paul Hawken in his recent book, Regeneration, what he says, we have to put life at the middle of everything that we do, life of all kinds, not just human life, but all life. And I think this is something, if we do this and respect all life, we begin to rethink our cities, and where do we need to put life back into the cities, either through urban regeneration, regenerative agriculture. It's actually looking throughout the entire systems in which we're a part of. And to me, this would be my answer to you back there, and saying, look at regeneration as a key word for the next decade, because if we don't do this, we're sort of toast, as a species. Dinosaurs lived on the planet for 165 million years. We might make it to 50,000, right? So it's very interesting how that kind of works with this synthesis. So we have time for one last question up here. Yes, sir, that's you. Don't be so. You got a cool T-shirt, so it's okay. Yeah. What's your question?
Okay, so my question is a bit related to what Catherine was talking about, how the politicians always want to, cut the ribbon and make the new bridge, but also related with what Jennifer was saying, that we need to, for example, build new systems for representative, new government, not new government, governance, new governance modules. So this is my question, I'm an architect and urban planner, and as a professional, it's very hard to see your place. How can you influence that? Because I saw it too many times, very good architects and urban planners getting jobs in the government, making change, and then 4 years later, they're fired, there's a new conservative government elected, then everything goes down, and in 4 to 8 years, we have to start again. So it's how within the problems of representative democracy, that is the best we have and that I hope we keep, how can we as professionals actually influence this? Is it more from the inside? Is it more from the outside? Is it more with community? Is it more from a technical perspective? What's
Got it. Great question. All the above.
Yeah, totally.
There you go.
Exactly.
So I'll let you guys take it.
Well, there's one, I mean, Berlin Science Week's gonna love me. I'm an artifact person. So there's, on the paper, there's an article in here, New Platforms for Wicked Problems. You should read it. It's about the sustainable transformation and how there's a communication problem. So it's gonna be hard, right? But I think it goes into what I see in my work across different disciplines and different stakeholders. I'm very interdisciplinary, so I work across different groups. The common thread that I see is people not investing enough to understand each other and really do and create that deep understanding around how do these different stakeholder groups, how do we approach them? So if we just take the interest of business, you know, a lot of times business will come, they got, you know, they sell, they got a solution, rather than saying to a city, approaching it from more of a place of curiosity and authentic care of what are your challenges? Where are you struggling with access? Where are you struggling with funding for, you know, and so really doing the work. I know we're all eager, we're change makers, we want to pop solutions out, we want to change the world, and that's a beautiful thing, but we got to roll back a little bit and meet each other where we're at a little bit more and invest a bit more in understanding each other.
Great answer. Hey, go ahead, Anna-Marie, and then Catherine.
Yeah, it's specifically related to the architects and planners. One way is, of course, and a lot of architects are doing that now, looking at circularity and at renovating buildings rather than just having these, you know, new generic boxes popping up everywhere. And you see that, let's say 20 years ago, when you had a lot of let's say, positive energy buildings, but that were based on mechanical ventilation systems, etc., that never really stuck with architects. But now circular solutions, renovating, taking these wonderful old buildings, and if they do have to be renovated, then putting new, maybe wood materials inside and creating these wonderful spaces, that is going on right now, and that a lot of architects are working in this way. We can help to promote this. But another way of working is, you know, as architects, we're trained to look across disciplines, across interests and needs, extracting the core, putting that together into new physical form or into a process that is going to get us there. And that is something you can use not just to create buildings or spaces, but in politics, in decision making, in companies to, you know, why should a board of a company only consist of economists and lawyers?
Yes.
You know, why not architects or urban planners? So I think as professionals, we need to take that space, not wait until someone invites us in.
Yes.
We take that, and more people should do that. And if more people do this as role models, a newer generation or anyone else will also follow and think, oh yes, I've always wanted to do that. They're doing that, I can do that too.
Yeah, it's a great one. Catherine, do you want to add one? Or?
Sure, I'll add something very shortly. I think we also should change the way we view our buildings and our profession. So right now, a lot of it is based on architecture. You have these big names in architecture, and they make big sculptures. I call them sculptures because I don't consider it always functional. And they get a lot of attention. And what I try to teach the students that go in my engineering and architecture classes is really, what do you want to be known for this crazy sculpture, or for having made something, made the society better, made the world better? And with the examples that you gave of circular architecture or regenerative architecture, and I think we need to change the way we look also at our own profession by being servants for a better city, for a better world, rather than a star.
Yep. Yeah, thank you. I think all three of those are really good advice, and it's a really great question. And I think I want to ask one final question of all of you, because we're getting out of time, and it is on Monday. I think we know what you're going to say, right? But on Monday, today's Saturday.
I don't know. Maybe I'll say something totally different.
It could be. I doubt it, though. On Monday morning, what would you like all of us to either look at, to do, to think about, a website, an article, an action? What would each of you ask of us for Monday morning?
First is be hopeful. I think there's a shifting consciousness. And so start your day with hope, because look how full this room is, right? It is happening, right? This conversation, this awareness is happening. And the second thing is get involved in your community. Citizen. So are you in government? Are you in a university? Where are you in society? How can you start to become a little bit more informed, a little bit more engaged. Maybe it's going to a city council meeting, or maybe it's something else. I don't know. Every community is different, but how can you start to citizen differently?
That's great.
I mean, we all live and work in buildings, right? So on Monday morning, whether it's at home, at work, at school, try to figure out who is in charge of building the environment that you work in, and try to find out if they know about stakeholders in the community that they should reach out to for building a more regenerative future for you to work in, to live in, to learn in, right? Try to, we talked a lot about connecting people, and try to see if you can find these stakeholders in your community and connect them with those people that are managing and constructing the buildings that you live and work in.
That's great. So take ownership of your presence.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great. Anne-Marie?
Right. I would think, I'm kind of opposed to the in 20 years from now, you know, it's far too long, we won't make it by that time. So if you would just, maybe not right now, we might not have time, but if you would just close your eyes and think, we're going to make it, you know, by 2030, let's say, somehow we manage the transition, and we have these beautiful, climate neutral, inclusive, affordable cities and communities. And if you then close your eyes and you think, what is that like? What do you see? What do you hear? What do you do on a daily basis? What do you smell? And then think, okay, so that image is what I want to see. That's where we need to go. And everything you meet on a daily basis, then if you're in a meeting and you think, this is boring, what are we talking about? Why aren't we doing something else? Or, oh no, you know, why do I need to do this activity? I should be doing something else. So don't just sit back or start to watch your email or start to think of something else, but just say so. Hey, I don't think this is the right thing. I think we should be talking about something else. We should be doing something else. And if people don't agree, maybe this is not the right spot for you and you should be somewhere else.
That's great.
So not thinking that someone else is going to solve it or some kind of solution will come along. So I think a large majority disagrees with the way we're doing things now.
Yeah.
It's just that no one, you know, wants to be the first to say or do something. So, but it helps if you have that, if you don't react against something, but if you have that positive image in mind, how is that wonderful life going to be? And then thinking of everything that happens and how it clashes with that image and how you could get to that
and
image.
how to build towards that, to build towards a positive.
Towards the beauty.
Towards that beauty. Yeah, that's really fantastic. So we are now at the end. Thank you three very, very much for a really engaging and rich conversation on so many levels. So thank you very, very much. Let's give all three of our guests a wonderful rousing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Really. And I'd like to thank all of you, both here and online, for choosing to come here at the Berlin Science Week in our beautiful Natural History Museum on Saturday evening to rethink cities. It is a wonderful thing for us all that we have the privilege of being able to do this. And it's important, I think, as we heard tonight, for us all to be thinking about how we learn better how to be good citizens and to be active citizens, because we can do this. We have the privilege. Societal readiness and how to participate. So with that, let us now participate in the city of this beautiful city of Berlin and a beautiful Science Week. And I wish all of you a wonderful evening, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you.